Welcome to episode 10 of Youth Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Jared. In this episode, we're joined by Derek and Trevor from the Colorado Division of Child Welfare. Together, we explore the resources and initiatives the state has implemented to support youth transitioning out of the foster care system.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and is for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of those of the guest only and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Thanks for joining me today, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be a part of this. Yeah, I just want to invite you guys to share a little bit about what you do and why you do it.
I can hop in first. So my name is Derek Blake. I am the Transition Services Administrator. It's a new title. I'm still getting used to it. So I'll have to remind myself every time. So I oversee multiple programs for youth who are transitioning out of foster care. So I oversee the Chafee program for the state. We also have a state grant program that helps supplement kind of our federal funding, education and training vouchers that some of our young people kind of access. And then we also have a brand new program, the Colorado Fostering Success Voucher program falls under me as well. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of who I am. I mean, I think ultimately how I got into this work in the first place was really just seeing how people in my family and my community were really encountering barriers, whether it was through like mental health or substance use disorder, really impacting their lives. And that's kind of where I really started. So way back in the day. And then kind of as I progressed throughout my career, I really wanted to make some larger impacts and really be able to influence and advocate for young people in the state of Colorado and really try to give them the things that they need to be successful in their lives. So ultimately, that's what drew me to the state.
That is so important. Thank you for sharing, Derek.
And I am Trevor Williams. I am the Youth Services Unit Manager for the Division of Child Welfare at the Colorado Department of Human Services. So I oversee the unit that supervises all of the programs Derek mentioned. Plus, we have in Colorado our extended foster care program that we call the Foster Youth in Transition Program, which is very new in Colorado in terms of how it runs and how it operates. Our unit also includes the Unaccompanied Refugee Minor Program, as well as our educational stability work. So we're supporting young people in staying where they are. We also support some of the efforts to make sure that young people who are dually involved with both the juvenile justice system and child welfare, on the child welfare side, how do we do that work better, and looking at that, as well as what we call program area for youth in conflict. So young people who become involved with child welfare primarily as a result of conflict within their home versus what is typically thought of as abuse or neglect in its traditional sense or form. How did I get into this? I worked at an adult inpatient mental health facility for 4 years right out of college. I got my degree in psychology at CU Boulder. I originally wanted to be one of the behavioral analysts for the FBI. So I went into adult inpatient mental health and at a facility up north in Thornton. And this was back in 2000 to early or mid 2004. Back then, we still had an adolescent unit at Fort Logan, and we would have young people come into the facility I worked in. It was an adult inpatient facility. We would have them come in at 18 at midnight. They would be sent in a cab from Fort Logan to our facility. And I watched what happened to those young people. So very early in my career, I got a picture of what that looks like and what the outcomes for those young people are. So when I had an opportunity to work in child welfare, and it was with young people involved with child welfare, it became my passion. How do I, as a caseworker, do the best job I can do to help make sure that never happens to the young people I work with. And that's just followed through my entire career. So the past 20 years, that's how I got here.
Wow, guys, this is such important work. Like, it's so important to be where you are, doing what you do, and advocating and helping and supporting these youth who are in these circumstances. Wow. So, yeah, that kind of leads me to like what has changed over time, like doing your work, just hearing that you've done it for quite a while. What has changed?
I can hop in first. And I can, so I've actually been in my role as it's kind of transitioned over the years for 9 years, which is amazing. So I have definitely kind of seen where kind of, especially where the work was at with older foster youth and kind of where we're at now has been a huge change. I would say ultimately it really comes down to overall support and acknowledgement that we need to do better for our older foster youth and really like expanding beyond that. So when I first started in my role, it was we had our federal Chafee award and we had our federal ETU award. Those were the only things that we had. And we're talking a total of $2 million to kind of help support young people throughout our state. It was a drop in the bucket of what we actually really needed to better support our young people. And I think it was, so now we have all the, like I said, when did my intro, we have all these other like programs and funding streams to help support our young people. Not to say that it's all about the money, but the money definitely kind of helps with actually providing services for young people and really ensuring that we have equitable access for young people throughout this state. That's the other thing that has really drastically changed is when I came in and you saw the counties that were being covered by Chafee programs, like there were a lot of blank spots in the maps. And Trevor and I have really worked hard to kind of expand so young people throughout our state can have access to those wonderful services. So that in the new funding has enabled us to kind of provide that opportunity for our young people too.
Yeah, so with that being said, like what are the innovative practices or programs that you've seen that significantly improve the outcomes for transition aged youth?
I mean, I think it's just, first of all, I would say having access to flexible funding for our young people. So really enabling us to kind of meet the needs of young people where they're at right now. Like I said, $2 million, you can stretch it, but it doesn't stretch too far. We now have the ability of like really, if young person needs work boots, like to start a construction job on Monday, we have more ability to pay for that now than we ever used to. So like really ensuring that we have that. The other piece that I would really like to throw out there too is the Colorado Fostering Success Voucher program. Like this, like I said, is relatively new program, and to be able to offer like housing assistance for young people throughout the state of Colorado, because we know the cost of living in Colorado is not cheap. So anything we can do to help support our young people and help them get on their way and to be able to offer that support until their 26th birthday, I think is huge. It's huge.
Yeah. Wow. Housing is essential and so important to so many people, especially those who are struggling. So that's amazing.
This is such an interesting question because I started as a caseworker in 2004, and child welfare's approach to supporting young people involved with our system could not be different. Back then, the thought was the young person was a problem that needed to be fixed. What was happening was a problem that needed to be fixed, and it was the young person who needed to fix it. It was incumbent upon them to fix it, and we were there as a system to help make sure that they fixed it or hold them accountable to being fixed. That's changed entirely. As a system, things have restructured in a way that even in our youth and conflict cases, there's now a assessment structure and a case structure that says you don't just look at what's happening with that young person, you have to look at the whole family system. What's driving that? What's the wheel that's turning the conflict? And how do we support the young person and the family as a whole in moving forward? Which all in and of itself was enormous. And then we think about extended foster care and what's happened there. In 2004, we had to get approval for a young person as a caseworker to remain in care beyond 18. We had to ask permission to make that recommendation for them to remain in care beyond 18.
Wow.
Not only that, we went to a court and told the court what we wanted to have happen. And the youth was then told what would happen for them. That's not true at all anymore. Young people transitioning to adulthood are given the choice. The foster youth and transition program reforms were enormous. It gave the young person a choice. What do you want? And not only what do you want, but we're going to offer reentry. So if you make a choice that doesn't work out, which used to be the fear, right? The young person left care and they were 18 years old. Well, they can't come back. They can't get help. We can't do anything about it. So we're going to force them to stay if we think they need to against their will, and then break trust in so many ways, because who wants to be forced to be in a system, right?
No one.
So it created that opportunity for them to make that choice with the safety of being able to come back and access services again, which was enormous and really created that option with a housing first approach where we say we give housing, we support with housing as a first item. It's not a privilege to be housed. You get to have housing if you're in the foster youth and transition program, and we will support you with everything else in our partnership instead of it being a one-way discussion, right? Via the voluntary services agreement. And to the innovative practices, Pathways to Success, which is a grant, well, it used to be a grant program. It's a model intervention that started as a federal grant, is now in its final evaluation. Colorado is the last state standing. We're the last intervention standing out of, I think, what was originally 18 interventions in our summative evaluation. And again, it's 100% about what does the youth need? What does the youth want? How do we treat this young person as a human being who's created, naturally resourceful, and whole? They are an entire person, and we're going to approach them as a person, not a problem, right? Some of those core tenets of coaching that allow us to entirely shift our mindset as a structure to help young people as they're making the struggle every single person has to become an adult. It's not easy for anyone. So,
Wow. I personally am very familiar with the Pathways model and the engaging youth in a coach-like way. And I think it's so important to put the youth first and let them kind of lead the way in the direction of services and help that they want to go with it, and not telling someone what they need or should do. Wow, that is amazing. What would you say is your favorite aspect about that sort of program?
it's a skill I wish I had had as a caseworker. Caseworkers don't always get things right. And
They're human.
right. And in the position I'm in now, it's very clear to me, right? Like what I could have done differently had I had a skill set like this, along with the supports to do it and do it right. And not only the skill set, but the structural assumption that the young people that we're working with don't need us to be successful. We are there to be of benefit to their success, to help them achieve their hopes and dreams, right?
The answers lie within them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, just that, like when Trevor was talking about like the introduction, like viewing people as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. The vast majority of the time, everybody knows what they need to do. It's how do we address the barriers that they sometimes built up in their own mind too. How do you push past that so they can achieve their goals? Is such a wonderful opportunity to work with young people on that capacity.
So that kind of goes along with like elevating youth individuality and like their voice. So In what ways do you directly help support them to get to that point in their journey?
I can start off, and like the first one that I'm going to mention is kind of clunky and governmental, so I apologize for that. But it's also, I think it's very important because it sets a frame for kind of how we should approach all of our different programs that we have. So like for any county department or program that's interested in Chafee funding, they have to apply for it on an annual basis. So one like kind of common theme throughout that application is how are programs going to integrate youth voice and what young people want and need into the services that they're providing for young people. So it ultimately really the services should be driven upon recommendations from young people themselves around what they think would actually really be beneficial. And I think that is such an important piece. And it's like, when you look at the application, every section is like, how are you going to integrate youth voice into the proposed services that you're going to provide? So that is kind of, I think it starts off clunky, but ultimately the spirit really behind it is everything that we're doing with young people should be driven by young people and kind of what they feel like would really benefit them. So that's the first thing. The other piece that I'll throw out there too is we also are very involved in the Colorado Youth Leadership Network. So that is really a meeting of youth advisory boards from throughout the state, as well as kind of youth serving agencies, all come together to talk about how do we best utilize youth voice? How do we best celebrate youth voice in the state of Colorado and bring lived experts to the table to actually have these conversations too, which I think is vastly really important. And kind of like when we're talking about client level, like really interventions, how Chafee programs work in general is it's not the Chafee worker who's coming up with the goals that they're going to work on together. It is really driven by the young person of like them identifying the goals that they really want to work on. And then how does the Chafee worker come alongside them and best support them as they're working towards achieving those goals?
And really getting into the government weedy stuff, the bureaucratic elements of the work that we do, rulemaking and the things that we do there when we create the rules and regulations that counties have to follow. Every rule packet this unit has put forward for the past at least 5 years, we hold youth-specific focus groups with lived experience youth. So we have worked most recently with the Lived Experts Action Panel that the Office of the Child's Representative houses. We've also worked with the organization that Derek had mentioned earlier. And prior to that, Project Foster Power. We would actually provide them copies of the rules and meet with them and talk to them about what the rules meant, why the rules were written the way they were, and we would ask, how should this be different? And I cannot think of a recommendation that was given that we didn't adopt in terms of the actual rulemaking prior to going to state board or being finalized at state board, which is actually the authority, the group that makes rules happen for human services in Colorado. It's called the State Board of Human Services. We always pay young people for their time when we ask for their help. There isn't a policy that we put forward. There isn't a thing that we do that we don't pull young people into as a matter of PYD or positive youth development, and really embracing that. It's key. Within the case planning process, we have entirely changed how we do what most states and we used to call independent living plans. These are things that caseworkers are required to do for young people who are in care within 60 days of them turning 14. So if they enter care or were in care, they turn 14 within 60 days of that birthday. This has to be done. If they're 14 or older and they come into care, we do these. It used to be something that was a meeting, but relatively status quo. It was called an independent living plan. And I know as a caseworker, when I sat down with young people and I said, let's do an independent living plan, oh my gosh, the panic that would show up in their eyes, right? Like, what do you mean? I'm 14, 15 years old. You're talking to me about where I'm going to live when I'm 18. Right? So we met with young people and they helped us rename it. So we named it Roadmap to Success, which came out of stakeholder groups that we held with young people that was reorganized so that it's about what young people want and how do young people want their hopes and dreams. So we centered it on that hopes and dreams idea, right? What does an assessment say? What do you do with that in consultation with the young person? What is the young person's hopes and dreams? And how do you put all of that together so that that young person can be the best version of themselves that they want to be going forward that helps them get there, right? Instead of it being, well, everyone needs to have an apartment at 18. So we're going to put you have an apartment. Does that work for you? Right? So really at every level, raising the youth voice. And honestly, the treatment plan in air quotes for the transition program as a whole is that roadmap to success. Right. So it's been a key part of the work that we've done for the past 8 or 9 years at the Division of Child Welfare. And our predecessors kicked that off. Right. So this isn't something that Derek, myself, or any of us have done. And we've been blessed to work in an agency that prioritizes and makes it happen. So
I love that so much. Talk about elevating and amplifying youth voice. Come on now. Wow. That is so amazing. If there was something, let me rephrase
Wait,
that.
Jared, can I interrupt you just for 1 second? Just as a youth voice, sorry. It came up just this week, a couple days ago. I was interacting with a young person who previously, a lived expert, right? Who's actually sitting on a board. And what they said to me was, one, sitting on this board, and I'm wondering if it's too complicated to get compensated to be on this board. And I don't really need the money right now, was what they said. And I was like, no. Every single other person on that board is getting paid to be there. You are an expert. That's why you're sitting on this board. You deserve to get paid just like everybody else who's sitting on that board. So, it really is, when Trevor is talking about that payment piece, yes, we're all getting paid to be there because of our expertise. Young people are no different, and they deserve to get paid as well. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I completely agree, because how do you get to that point where you're a professional and you're an expert if you didn't already start when you were younger? And by definition, young people, youth, that expands from what, adolescent to 24, 25, and even a little above that. I think youth is kind of an umbrella term that's used by professionals in this different capacity sometimes. And I think not a lot of people realize that youth encompasses a wide range of ages. So with that being said, how do you guys in the child welfare services measure success for transitional aged youth beyond just numbers and statistics?
I can take a first crack at it, and then Trevor can hit it up too. I think the biggest thing that comes to my mind is youth stories and youth experiences. Exactly what comes through with integrating youth voice in a meaningful way is you get to hear exactly what happened to our young people when they were in the system, when they left the system, throughout their lives. And sometimes it's good stories, sometimes it's bad stories. But it's all from their own words, and you really get a better understanding than statistics just don't give to you. You get to know the ins and outs and kind of what happened at a certain age for them, and what was, you get to hear about a young person and a worker that really impacted them and how they impacted them. And I think those are so incredibly important of like not just having it be black and white, but also having the gray area in between kind of statistics. Cause like there's a lot in between those that we miss oftentimes when we're spouting off, well, 19-year-olds have a rate of 36% like homelessness rates. And it's like, there are so many, it really like dilutes young people's experiences in a way that sometimes is not helpful. So I think that is one of the biggest things that comes to mind for me.
I'm hearing you say like having that person to person actual conversations with that youth actually helps you kind of get to know that individual. And then like it gives you more information to kind of build off of and help support other people who are in potentially similar situations.
Exactly. Yep.
And, this is an interesting question because we live and die on measures that are statistical, right? That is absolutely something that we do consider and we do think about because stakeholders want to know, right? How are things going? Where are things? How are they improving? So we do rely on the National Youth in Transition database for that. And we look at that and where those numbers are going. Are young people reporting experiencing homelessness at a lower rate? Things along those lines. Some other things that don't necessarily get the numbers associated with them. There was a bill that was passed, it was 2017 or 2018, that required a steering committee, and it was called the Former Foster Care Steering Committee. Derek was one of the co-chairs of that steering committee. Thank you so much, Derek, for a lot of work on that. And it made a whole set of recommendations that relied to youth voice earlier. It relied on youth voice. The committee itself was a bunch of professionals, but we hired external folks to go out and meet with young youth groups and tell us what they wanted and give us their ideas. And some of them came back and presented, and that data was presented, and it informed the recommendations that went into that report, which was published in 2018. Is that right, Derek? 2018 was when that, yep. And that has been a bench post. So a lot of the reforms, a lot of the things that we've talked about, or all of them, are tied directly to that report, right? So what is it that we need to do to improve outcomes for young people? And then going forth and doing that. So if you look at that report and you walk through it, it's almost a roadmap to the things that have changed in our practice and our policies over the last 5 years. So that's been a less measurable, but very present thing. And again, continuing to pull youth in because we know things change and that landscape changes, right? So that we do that continuous quality improvement as we go forward so that it doesn't become stale and stagnant.
Yeah. Also, like, in order to continue, like, providing services and doing what we do, like, data is so important, especially at the kind of state and federal level, to be able to make sense of what we're doing is actually impacting change and impacting these youth in a way that's helpful and gonna put them on, like, a good path, whatever that looks like for them. So I'm hearing you guys say it's kind of like a balance of like, yes, it's necessary to have statistics and data, and it's also necessary to have that like real life information kind of throughout your organization and like person to person and like, caseload. So I want to ask if there was one thing you could change about the child welfare system that supports transition aged youth, what would you change and why?
Oh my, we only get one thing to change now. I think the magic wand question, right? Like, I think there are many different ways that we kind of go with this question. I think what really kind of comes to the forefront is how do we keep like children, youth, and families from even coming in the front door of the child welfare system. Like kind of, and I know there has been work for years and years and years on this front, but really that preventative care of like, how do we provide families the resources that they need in their communities to address barriers at that level where they don't even rise to the level where we need to intervene as a child welfare agency. I think that is like the biggest thing. And like whenever I'm talking to like new workers that come into the Chafee program, and it's really like, or I get asked, what does the Chafee program do? What I first think about is how do we create a community around our young people? And I think bringing that mentality to like families in general, like how do we create a community around them where they have the support that they need, where they don't rise to the level of kind of coming into the child welfare system in general. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that, because then they wouldn't even need the intervention because they would have the support they needed beforehand.
Dude, my entire goal is to work myself out of a job.
Thank you. That's exactly the point, right?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with what Derek just said. And when we are necessary, when we do need to become involved to support young people, making sure that we are engaging them in a manner that's effective and getting improved practice opportunities out there for folks to use, right? Really leveraging the things that we're learning about coach-like engagement and how approaching someone in that manner where we're saying you are a whole perfect person already, and there may be challenges because there are challenges for all of us, and we're going to support you in identifying a path forward without judgment, without assumptions that you have to have us or need us. Change that I would make is that we would grow further in that direction. We've made so many amazing changes over the past, gosh, especially like I said, 5 years. It's been change after change after change to really make things better, getting them down and helping people really do that meaningful work and support young people so that no one feels like there's someone who needs to be fixed, right? So that everyone feels, and our young people who are leaving care feel that they deserve to be cared about, that they deserve to be who they are, and that who they are is okay. There may be some things that can make things better, right? But who they are is perfect and okay at its core from the get-go.
I love both your responses. That is so important and just critical in like anyone's development, like especially like youth who have dealt with some trauma or dealt with just some difficulties that are major or not that major, or and just understanding that everyone is impacted and affected by different things in different ways. That's so important. Wow. So I have one final question. What are some key elements and key points that you want to share about the child welfare system?
Sorry, navigating back. Oh my. So, I mean, Colorado Department of Human Services. So the agency that we work for is extremely large and covers a lot of different ground. I think both Trevor and I work for the Division of Child Welfare. So, I mean, ultimately, what our main goal is, how do we best support the 64 counties throughout the state of Colorado and really provide that guidance and help with the implementation of certain programming and really ensure that like the county departments really have what they need to be successful in kind of their work with children, youth, and families throughout the state of Colorado. I would say like one of our main focuses right now is how do we improve foundational support for young people throughout the state of Colorado. So us doing this podcast is like a perfect opportunity, right? To talk about where we are now, but also thinking to the future of how can we better serve our young people throughout the state of Colorado, and how do we better support our counties in working with young people throughout the state of Colorado. I'm going to turn it over to Trevor. I'm sure Trevor has a bunch to say about this too.
We have programs to support young people, and we're here to support, right? We have partnerships that we have developed and grown through all of these different works and development of all of these programs with a number of other state agencies, like the Colorado Department of Higher Education, the Department of Local Affairs, who oversees housing vouchers more broadly and housing more broadly in the state of Colorado, the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance, or lovingly called HCPF. We have lots of partnerships that we can leverage to support people's understanding and connection with resources. So if young people in the state of Colorado who think they might be eligible for services, who are former foster youth, need those supports, Derek and I and our teams are always available to provide those connections and those warm handoffs. While DCW oversees, or the Division of Child Welfare oversees, very few programs directly, right? As we talked about, we supervise the counties and programs by and large who do that, right? We have that umbrella. We do have the ability to do that warm handoff and that connection, because sometimes young people don't know who to reach out to, right? We want to make sure there is no wrong door. If a young person needs assistance and needs support, they can always send us an email, which we can provide to you to add to the show notes if you'd like, to reach out and ask about eligibility for any of the programs that we would be happy to help figure out. I think there's just a lot of opportunity right now. And for your older listeners, for whom a lot of our programs don't necessarily support anymore because we think youth, right? We do have foster ed. Foster ed has no upper age limit, right? So if someone was in foster care in 1994 and they aged out of foster care at 18 in 1994 and they were in care in the state of Colorado, they qualified for foster ed, right? And we will help them sort out how to access that eligibility. So we are always more than willing to support and connect and make sure things go as smoothly as they possibly can and or connect. So
Thank you guys so much for being here today, and thank you for all of your insight and your voice and the work that you guys do. It is so important and just essential to the lives of so many people who need this or even want this, I want to invite you guys, if there's any final notes that you guys want to add, feel free to share. But I just thank you guys for your time, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. This was such a great opportunity. You can see, Trevor and I are very passionate about the work that we do. And we have worked with each other for a very long time. So it's also, we are more than happy to come have these. We could talk about all this stuff for days on end. I don't think you have that much time, but yeah, we really love when folks from the community reach out, and we are more than willing to talk to folks too. So thank you, Jared, for the opportunity.
thank you so much, Jared. This is an amazing podcast. It's really cool and just excited to be able to be a part. So thank you for inviting us to talk about these programs.
Absolutely.